Welcome, Emily, and thank you for joining us today to discuss your recent article in InterACT magazine, Mindfulness in the Early Years Classroom.
Hi, Anne-Marie. It is so good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm from Canada, and I've been an international school teacher for about 10 years now, moving all over, mainly in Asia. And I've been living in Beijing for 3 years now. And mindfulness, meditation, yoga is my core. It's who I am. It's what I live and breathe. So I live my life teaching, and I live my life being mindful.
So, mindfulness is a part of your personal practice. What led you to implement that in your classroom this year?
Well, I noticed that a couple of my students were, because of a million reasons, let's think about the pandemic, everything that's been going on. My students they're 5 years old, they haven't had a year in a classroom, a full year in a classroom ever. And I've noticed they've been really struggling regulating their emotions, controlling their emotions, understanding their emotions. They don't know where a feeling is coming from. And recognizing that in my students, it made me pause and think, we're all human, we're all having this. What do I do in my life that helps me as an adult understand how I'm feeling? Mindfulness is that, meditation is that, yoga is that. And I said, why can't I bring this into my classroom? I'm always a positive person, and I'm always bringing positive relationships in my classroom with my students. But I realized I was neglecting to allow my students to recognize them in themselves and have that positive experience with themselves. So from that, I kind of moved into daily mindful practices, routines, and I've seen a really big shift in my students this year. And it's helped them a lot because we recently just went online. And having that shift, having that routine and practice has really helped them a lot.
How do you then vulnerably model mindfulness for your students, because it is a big part of your personal practice? How have you brought that into your classroom?
It's a great question. And I'm very honest with my students, and I communicate with them really, really well and honestly. And we use the I feel statements. So oftentimes, for example, if I'm teaching in the class and I'm really excited about what I'm teaching, and I might turn around and I see two students talking, I will pause the class and kindly say, I feel hurt when that happens. I feel hurt when people are talking while I'm trying to teach something. It makes me feel this way. And I try not to put that on the students and make them feel bad, but I talk about how I feel. And just being open and honest in conversation with them and having dialogue with them about how I feel. And some days my patience might be really low and I will pause a class when that happens and I'll say, you know what? I'm really sorry. And I'm sorry that happened, but this is how I feel. And can we talk about it? And what's really great is that modeling this, I see my students use it when they're outside at recess, when they're playing with others, they use that language. And it allows them to calm down, and allows them to talk and actually be communicators and actually communicate with other people well. And it's been helping them, I think.
I know in your article you mentioned parents providing feedback about actual practices from your classroom. Can you talk a little bit about what parents are saying?
Oh my gosh, having the parents comment about it was, I think, such a gold sticker for me. Because I was a little afraid to implement this into a classroom, not knowing how parents would respond to it, because it is kind of in worlds like woo-woo, people might be like, what are you doing? We should be doing the standards. But parents would email me and say, thank you, Emily. Thank you so much. I have, for example, one of my students, you could say she's a perfectionist. And if there are ways that sometimes if she can't finish her work on time, she might break down, she might cry, she might start breathing heavily. And these strategies have really helped her. And her mom noticed that. And her mom emailed and said, thank you so much. Like, I need this. I need these practices at home. What can I do? And another student of mine, he's very athletic, and he really loves to do his best and be the best. Like, he's a student that's very gifted. And if there's a moment that someone might beat him, he struggles with that. Like, he struggles with that identity of being like, uh-oh, how did I lose? Why did I lose? And so this has really helped him. And his parents have reached out and said, thank you. Like, we've noticed that in moments that he might have, quote unquote, failed, he stops himself and he's like, that's okay. You know, I can breathe through this. I'm okay. What can I learn from that? And it's been really nice to see that and have that positive response from parents.
So you've taught your students obviously a lot. What lessons have your students taught you about either teaching pedagogy and practice and the importance of mindfulness in the classroom?
Yes, they've taught me that it's never too early to start. I was afraid kind of to start with such littles. They're 5. They were 5 when I started, and I thought, and many people said they're not going to focus. They're not going to sit for 5 minutes quietly. Mm-hmm. And I kind of said, well, let's try it. You know, I've done meditation. I've done mindfulness with older kids, not with youngers, not with littles. And they've taught me that there's no bad time to start. They're never too young. Yeah. And they also, if I miss a day of meditation or a day of coloring or a day of journaling, they'll tell me. They'll tell me. They'll be like, Miss Emily, why didn't we do it today? We need to do it. We need to sit quietly.
So they're showing you the importance of mindfulness in the classroom by asking for it. It's important to them in their daily schedule and their daily routine. They've obviously incorporated that as part of their daily practice.
Right, exactly. And if it slips my mind, which it does, right? We get into the busyness of teaching and it slips my mind, but they'll bring it back to me. They'll remind me.
What about you? What have you learned about yourself, and how has the implementation of mindfulness in your classroom helped you grow as an educator?
It actually has sparked possibly new career paths or possibly a new avenue for me to go down. I'm since beginning this year and really diving deep in it with my students, I've started researching courses on mindfulness and how to implement those well into classrooms so I can be more educated. I'm thinking about taking my yoga teacher training because I practiced yoga for 15 years and I do it with my students, but this way I can really make sure that I'm getting to the foundations of it, and thinking about being a wellness coach in schools and being that coach to help other educators to use this into the classroom. And it opened me up a lot this year. And I did a lot of risk taking this year because I did go into other classrooms and go into my colleagues' classrooms and say, hey, you know, this has really worked out. Can I try this with your kids? Like, I think that this might help. And all grades, from grades 1 to grade 5, and talking to the middle high teachers. And it just ignites a spark in me. It makes me so happy. And seeing that is driving me possibly into a different outlet of teaching, of educating. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, you know, not everyone is as open-minded as you and embraces mindfulness as part of a classroom practice.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they're noticing that there's something that needs to change in their classroom, that maybe they're noticing the same things in their students, the social emotional challenges that they're having, the challenges that students are having in regulating their emotions, all of those pieces. What advice would you give to other educators or colleagues about how to begin implementing mindfulness practices in their classrooms?
This is Great question, because I actually do give this advice to people, because people have come to me and said, this works for you. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I feel like imposter syndrome. I'm not, that I don't practice mindfulness. How can I bring this in? And I said, well, your students the best, and you know what's going to work for them. And I think the biggest thing, and what you actually just pointed earlier, is routine. Routine. You make that a routine. You be patient. I said to a colleague a couple months ago, be patient. One lesson is not going to change them. One lesson is not going to make them so zen that you walk into your classroom, they'll never have an outburst or anything. I said, just be patient. And like anything else, practice, practice, practice. Have that routine. Your students are going to remember that, and they will bring it back to you. And slowly and hopefully surely, you'll start to see the changes. You'll start to see it being implemented into their lives outside at recess, at lunchtime, in the cafeteria. Like, you'll begin to see them using the practices that you're bringing into the class. But the key thing is being patient, because I think that's what a lot of people think is like, and I did too, right? I'm like, oh, 1 5-minute meditation and my kids will they'll be so quiet. And no, like it takes time. And it's not always going to be perfect, right?
I was going to ask you that piece about how do you unpack that with kids or when it fails? Because I mean, I've tried meditation before. Sometimes I have a monkey mind and it lasts for 30 seconds. Sometimes I can lay there for 5 minutes. Sometimes I just give up. So how do you unpack that with your kids? And what do you tell your colleagues about when it fails?
Right. Yes. It does fail some times in my class where my students will just kind of roll around and they'll get into it. And like I said, I know my students, and if that's where they're at in that day, I'm not going to push it. Like I won't push it. But I think just always stepping up to the plate, always coming in at that time, having that routine, saying, we're going to come to the carpet, and it's okay if your mind, we talk. If I notice that they're not able to sit quietly or mindfully, then I talk to them. I'll talk them through it. I'll say, okay, let's bring our breathing somewhere else. Let's focus on something else. Maybe we can find something on the floor you can trace. And if they're still really just they're not having it, then okay, like, great job. We did it. Let's go into coloring time. Let's go into mindful coloring and move them from that space. But at least we made it there. At least in my brain, in my class, at least we got it there, because I believe the second I just stop doing it, they're going to think, well, this wasn't important, and I don't need to do this. And then we'll never be able to get back into that routine, right?
So that I hear you saying, like, it's very important, and maybe that is some good advice for colleagues, is to set aside a time and to be consistent with that time. And even if it fails within that time, to go back to it again the next day.
Next day, yes. Every day for us, it's 11 o'clock. And my student, and in their article, I mentioned that, like, I write down how it looks every day in my class. 11 o'clock, the students know it now, and they hear the bell. And even when we're online, it's 11 o'clock every day. And they hear the bell for cleanup time, because we're play-based, so they're playing all morning, and they hear that bell, they clean up quietly, and now they come to the carpet and they just sit quietly, because they know that, they'll hear it. They're like, oh, it's meditation time. And then sit down. But of course, still in this moment, especially online, it's hard to make them sit there quietly online, and you can see them maybe rolling around on a couch or something. But I think just still showing up is the most important thing.
So you have a lot of experience. So I'm guessing you have a lot of resources and things that you draw upon to support the practice in your classroom. What are some of your go-to resources for mindfulness and meditation that you can use with students?
GoNoodle is great. GoNoodle has a lot of mindful breaks. They have breathing exercises. So GoNoodle is excellent to use. And I know a few teachers at our school also use that. So that's great. I use Insight Timer. It's a meditation app, and I use it for myself. So I bring it into the class, and the music helps them. There's also, I have a few books with like guided meditations for the students. Like I find young children guided meditations that kind of guide them through a journey, and that has been helpful. Yoga, online YouTube yogas. When I'm not leading it, maybe I do cosmic yoga online. The kids really like that. And just finding mandalas for mindful coloring. Any type of coloring page, I find that has a lot of little spaces that allows them to really think about and take the time to really practice slow coloring. And it's actually really interesting. When I first started the mindful coloring, we had mandalas, and some students would just take a marker and go right over it really quickly, because they like that quick finish, right? And they would do that, and they would be done. I'm like, okay, so let's try that again and think about the colors you use. Oh, why did you choose that color? Why those two colors together? How does this one make you feel in that small space? Like, why did you do this pattern this way and that pattern that way? And getting them to really think about those mandala boxes. And now I've noticed those students that would rush through it, they're now doing a lot slower and taking their time, and they feel proud about it. And so that's been really nice.
Do you do any journaling with the kids?
You know what? I was thinking about this morning, Emery. I was thinking about
journal. I know. So that's
yeah. I journal every day. But I was actually thinking about this morning, where I don't journal with my students, but I have told older grades that that's something great to do with them. And with my students, I guess this is a reflection for myself. And as I was thinking about it today, that's something I would want to implement still at this age level. I think that it's great. And I thought about having a little journal book where they could put maybe it's just mark making, maybe it's just doodling or whatever for the first. And then by this time of the year, they could possibly write words and sentences. But I think journaling is an amazing practice, and I would definitely try implementing that in next time as a reflection for myself.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, because I've taught kindergarten too, and we always scaffold the learning for them and give them examples, but having the ability to draw a picture about how they're feeling, and then having those words that those feeling words, like a variety of feeling words that they could use to even label that.
Right.
Might be a helpful way to start the journaling process with them.
That's great. I agree. Yeah.
Well, Emily, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add or tell others about mindfulness in the classroom, or any other sage advice that you have?
My advice is just try it. Try it. The students actually love it a lot more than you might think.
If people wanted to reach out to you, Emily, how could they go about doing that, to talk to you a little bit more? Are you active on Twitter or LinkedIn or email?
I am active on Twitter. I just don't know my Twitter handle. I'm like newly active on Twitter just the past while.
We'll put it up there.
Okay. Yes. You know it, Anne-Marie. Yes. I'm active on Twitter, and my email. Yeah, my email is great.
Excellent. Thanks for taking the time today, Emily. I appreciate it. I wish you well in your new adventure, and please keep us posted as to where you go next and where you go with this mindfulness practice for students. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching and learning with us at SchoolRubric with educators from across the globe. For more access to articles, magazines, podcasts, live episodes, our international school directory, courses, and more, visit us at schoolrubric.org. Thank you.